Let me guess, you signed up for every free lead magnet and binged on every marketing YouTube video and thought, what am I missing? Why isn't my business exploding like that? Well, I can tell you, you're not alone. Whether you're just getting started or have an established business, entrepreneurship can be really lonely. But it doesn't have to be. Overcoming your fear of launching or building your personal brand or figuring out how to scale, it shouldn't be holding you back. It should be empowering you. On this podcast, we're going to deep dive into the mechanics of what it takes to build your brand, make your mark, and stake your claim in the digital marketing space. I'll be chatting with people from all walks of life and stages in their careers. I will be getting inspiration from real experts who will share their actual strategies and techniques to grow loyal and raving followings and sell more stuff. This is entrepreneurship from people who are already there making it happen. My name is Jeff Mendelson. Join me and welcome to the One Big Tip podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have Jay Shifman with me on the line. Jay is an addiction and mental health speaker. He's a writer, consultant, coach, and an advocate, and host of the Choose Your Struggle podcast. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Jay, you have a lot of commas in there. I was wondering if you could take a few minutes and sum up what it is you do and what makes you awesome.
Man, that's great. A lot of commas. That's nice. It's interesting. I have that all in there because so when I started out, my background actually is in nonprofit fundraising and politics, and I'm 10 years in recovery as of March 2010 was my recovery date. So 10 years last month. And when I started doing this work, it was mostly speaking. And then I was asked, can you write something about what you did? I said, sure. And then it was, well, have you ever done any consulting? And I had, and it just kept growing. And so it got to the point where, as you said, there's a lot of commas. But it's all under the banners of addiction and mental health. And, that's what is incredibly important to me. That's why I get out of bed every day. I wear a necklace around my neck that has, my reminder that, I am in recovery. This is, as I say, the first line of my bio and the last line of my obituary is that was kind of what made me. And I used to wear that as a badge of shame, but now I'm incredibly proud.
That's actually very interesting that you talk about that, and in that you have this physical, tangible element that is on you to remind you of your past, and it's actually the past that is propelling you to move forward. I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit more, because that's actually something that I don't think a lot of people understand from people who are in recovery. I mean, no matter what the time frame is, whether you're recovering from something a trauma that happened a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, like how does that play out for you?
Yeah. So the physical part is it's interesting. One of the reasons I wear this every day is that I like to joke. Not long ago, my dad reminded me that when I was at my absolute worst, which was, the year 2009 or so, I was set to get the words bipolar tattooed on my arm because I was so convinced of my own label. It turns out that label wasn't correct. I was misdiagnosed. I was started on medication when I was a teenager for ADHD, as many people of my generation were, and it really messed with my brain. Is the long, sort of the short version of a much longer story. And I ended up having all these symptoms that we couldn't be explained, and I was called bipolar. Turns out I was struggling with an addiction to all these pills. I was taking I was overdoing every single one of the pills that I was prescribed. And in the summer of 2009, I finally overdosed. And again, long story short, that I've told many times, you can find that other places, but ended up kicking all of that and entering recovery in 2010. And my symptoms mostly disappeared. And so it was a really trying time, obviously, but it forged for me who I am today. And it taught me a lot about both myself and sort of what was possible.
You know, what's interesting about your trajectory is that not only did you overcome the addiction for yourself and for your family, and, just so you can continue to lead a productive life, but now you have taken that to the complete next step, which is to help others. And this leads into your one big tip, where you talk about not just addiction, but also people's mental health and mindfulness, and what they can do in order to help improve themselves. And you actually have a method for that.
I do. So I like to tell people that I was forced to learn good mental health habits in pretty much the worst possible way. We growing up we're taught health, right? It was sometimes we're taught health. We all have PE, so we learn physical education, but we're not taught emotional health. We're not taught behavioral health. And it's really forced upon us to learn that sort of in the wild. My wild was while struggling with addiction and then entering recovery. And so I had to learn that in a very trying way. And so all of what I do now is sort of distilling that and trying to help people learn in a way that's hopefully not nearly as trying and as demanding as what I had to go through. And as you touched on, I call my method the most ways method. It does come from a lot of, look, I'm not the first person to recommend a lot of what I'm saying today, but I did come up with that title, and it's an acronym, mostly just so I can remember it. But it stands for mood, stability, warning signs, and yes, self-care.
Interesting. So, let's dive into that. So first of all, your mood, right?
Yes.
I think it's, especially when someone comes up, like your girlfriend comes up to you, change your mood. It's like, dude. All right. So it's not always that easy, right?
That's right. That's right.
So what would be like a good step for changing that, for making that happen?
Yeah. So the first step is simply having your awareness of it, right? You can't start to change it if you don't have that awareness. And so what I recommend with everybody I coach is you track your mood. That's the very first step. Spend the next week or 2 weeks between our first and second session tracking your mood. I use an app called Mood Track. I think it's the easiest. It's a 1 to 5 scale. You can enter notes if you want, but you don't have to use that app. I just find it incredibly useful. But the tip there is simply, when you go to bed every night, before you turn off the lights, whether it's a notebook, whether it's an app, pull something out and rate your mood 1 to 5. And the key there is you can't just rate how you're feeling at that second, because that's not your entire day. What you want to do is be mindful of how your day went, be aware of where your mood was throughout the day. If you were at a 4 and then you ended the day at a 2, that's okay, rate it a 3. But you need to be aware. Some days I'm constant the whole day, and other days I'm a little bit around the mark. But as long as you can have that awareness of on a scale of 1 to 5, or I've had some people do 1 to 10 if they want to get really detailed. That's your first step, is simply tracking where it was.
So it's interesting. I was looking at journaling apps a couple months ago, and normally what I do when I binge on something like this is I download them all. Right.
Yeah.
So I've had like 5 or 6 journaling apps on my phone, and most of them have that feature where I think Day One is one of them. And I don't know, there are a couple others you can, that you can put down, or you can like make up your own and just store it in Evernote. What does that tracking do for you in that, okay, I get the part where, Monday through Friday, I'm rating my mood by 1 to 5. What do I do with that information at the end of the week? Or as I look back over the previous month, like what do I do with that information as I'm tracking it?
That's a wonderful question.
I'm tracking it, I should say.
Yeah, that's great. So 2 things I actually think that this is helpful of. The first is, like I said, that mindfulness piece, right? You can't begin to start addressing something if you're not aware that it's there. And that comes up in a lot of what I do. So that's number 1. Number 2, the second step in the most ways method is stability. And you can't tell your stability. Look, if you're like me, you probably can't remember what you had for breakfast today. But if you have something there showing you, okay, so I was a 4 today, I was a 3 yesterday, I'm 4 the day before, that's okay. As long if you're within a couple, if you look at mine, I stay between a 3 and a 4 pretty much every day. But if you're looking at the last 2 weeks and you're a 5 and you're a 1, you're a 3, you're a 2, okay, we've got some work to do there. Let's start diving into why it may be that your stability is so low.
So you would use that information initially for yourself, but once you decide to engage a coach to help you out with this, that would then be the documentation that you would bring to the session to actually help you go through with it. And maybe they can see some commonalities with what's going on, whereas I initially could not. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm a really big baseball guy. And, one of the best things about baseball is you can tell sometimes from the numbers, some things you can't even tell from the naked eye. So if I sit down with a client, I may not be able to actually get down to what's bothering them if they're not willing to open up. And, part of that is my job to be able to work with them and make them feel comfortable. But if they show me that rating, they show me that stability piece, and it's all over the map, then we can start diving in and going, okay, so this day you were a 2. Let's start talking about what might have happened that day. And that's where we come to the third step, which is the warning signs. And those can be anything from your temper, your substance use, your physical health, your sleep, what you're eating. For the most extreme cases, if you're having suicidal thoughts, all of those go into that third step. And we can start honing down onto some of those because, perfect example, again, as a guy in recovery, I know if I look back at my week and I've had a drink 3 or 4 days, and by the way, I am in recovery, I'm not sober. That's a deeper topic for another day.
All right.
But I know that if I've had a drink 3 or 4 days in a row, my wife and I need to take a day off, not because I'm afraid that something is going to happen, but it means that, okay, maybe I'm not dealing with my emotions the right way. Maybe that I'm drinking to try to cover something. And usually I'm in tune with that enough that I know when that's happening. But occasionally I do need to check those warning signs.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked about mood, the stability part that we're looking for, the stability as you're journaling.
Yes.
The warning signs may or may not present themselves overtly, sometimes covertly. I mean, you yourself needs to be on the lookout for those, as well as your coach or your therapist needs to be, okay,
That's right.
what could be triggers or warning signs that people need to be on the lookout for. And then the last part is taking care of yourself.
That's right.
That's really interesting. So what would be an example of that? Is that just exercise and more mindfulness, or is there something deeper than that?
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. That is a huge part of it is, if you are not getting in your physical exercise, especially, as we're recording this and COVID is still a big deal, it's very difficult to get in that physical exercise. So that's definitely number one. And in the mindfulness piece is number two. We hear a lot about things like meditation, and that is amazing forms of mindfulness. But mindfulness is also just simply being aware, being in tune with how you're feeling and what your thoughts are. But for me, when I talk about self-care, I mean the things you do to take a break. On my podcast, the Choose Your Struggle podcast, I finish with every interview with asking my guests to talk about their self-care habits. It can be everything from as simple as taking a bath, or my wife recently has got into watercolor painting. But I actually interviewed someone today, and she was telling me that every Sunday, her and her boyfriend, they have what they call sensual Sundays, and I love that, where the entire day they just do things to help their mental health. So they go for walks together, they cook together, they take a break and just read the paper and drink their coffee together. And I love that. I think that's wonderful. So if you're not doing enough things like that, whatever works for you, reading, running, whatever it is for you, that's a good sign to me that that's the first place we need to start, is helping you take a break, helping you unplug for a while.
That is some amazing advice, man. Thank you so much for that. Jay, why don't you tell people where they can find you, and if they want to reach out to learn more, how they can reach you? Definitely.
So number one is checking out my podcast, the Choose Your Struggle podcast. But number two, my website, www.jayshifman.com. if you tell me that you heard me on this podcast and you're interested in some coaching, I've got a deal I've got going on. So I really appreciate you having me here, Jeff, and definitely hope to hear from some of the people who've listened to the podcast.
I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.